Press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update.
Let's call on stage Mr. Anuj Gandhi and Mr. Curt Marvis. Can we have you on stage, sir?
Are we on
hi,
here?
Curt.
Yes,
Welcome to India. I believe so. We had a sidebar before the session, and Curt was telling me that all his life he's traveled, but he never came to India before March 2016.
Correct.
Right? And for an avid photographer and then into music videos, what he's doing is truly amazing. But tell me, how come this idea? I thought all the sessions that we saw before that, people are very clear. They want to slot digital and TV separate. TV is mother, is good, but digital is separate. You are trying to marry the both mediums. Where did the idea come from?
Well, earlier on in my career, I was just talking to someone the other day that MTV started in 1981, which is now almost 40 years ago. Where I was very involved as a producer of music videos back in the 80s and early 90s, and one of the co-founders of the Q, a guy named Les Garland, is one of the founding executives, along with Bob Pittman and others, of the original MTV and the original VH1. And at the time that started, really the reason they called it music television is MTV was bringing radio to TV. That's what it was all about. So it was basically programmed. Everybody who started MTV came out of the radio business. And it was really just a visual radio channel, which sounds kind of crazy now 40 years later, but that was what the original concept was behind that. Jumping forward to the present, throughout the last 20 years, have kind of played in between the traditional media space and the digital media space. And my last role before I started this company was as president of digital at Lionsgate. And I knew the guys who started YouTube and saw the onslaught of digital video happening. And early on at Lionsgate, I actually produced the first original program that Hulu ever made. It was a short animated series called Trailer Trash. Before Hulu had even made a corporate decision that they were going to make original content or do what they're doing today. So I was always fascinated with the concept of short-form video content and digital content creators and what that could mean as we went forward. Jumping even further forward to the very recent past, Jeffrey Katzenberg had a company that when it was originally started was called New TV. And the new TV for him was this little device here called the smartphone. And that company is now called Quibi. They just raised $1 billion to create premium digital-first content, primarily for mobile devices. But the trend that we saw with Q was that short-form digital content was a real business and was a real medium. And it wasn't just the business of traditional 2-hour movies or half-hour TV shows or hour TV shows, but short form was going to become a real business. And so much of what the Q is all about as a business is really acknowledging that and building around that.
Yeah, but tell me, why India?
Well, India, as you just mentioned, I've traveled all around the world, and I'd never set foot in India until spring of 2019 when the event I went to called Ficky Frames was started by Mukesh Ambani standing on stage and announcing that he was going to launch a company that fall called Jio. And what I was fascinated by, as I think I said to you earlier, I listened to him and I said, if he does half of what he's saying, it'll change the landscape of what's happening here and probably outside of India as well. Frankly, maybe he's done twice as much as he said he was going to do at this point. But the other thing that was fascinating to me about India was that the television business is still a growth business here. And so India becomes a very, very interesting territory on any number of levels. First, just as an economic territory, it's growing, by leaps and bounds, and I would argue is in a position much of what China might have been 15 or 20 years ago in terms of what's going to happen here for growth. Specifically, the media, entertainment, and mobile areas, I think, are even going to see that at an advanced level. And I think that we always see ourselves with what we're doing with the Q as building a bridge between the traditional media business and the digital media business, and this seemed to be a unique place to do that. In addition to that, India is filled with an incredible number of very, very talented digital content creators. And so at the very basis of everything that we do, there has to be great short-form digital content that's being created on an ongoing basis, and we saw that opportunity here.
So tell me, on the content side, it's clearly, you know, the way we've been brought up in some of the clips that I just saw, the digital content by definition is on sometimes very edgy. It's not what families watch together, right? Whereas the normal GEC content is more family viewing, and India is a 97% single TV household. So if you take that kind of content, which is slightly edgier, slightly for youth, slightly out there, to take it to TV screen, don't you think that's a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenge. I think that's where the opportunity lies, actually, is because historically in all media, in all territories, whether it's in India or the United States or Europe or wherever, there's always been sort of seminal moments in media history where something has changed the landscape of what's sort of being done there and acceptable. One of the interesting things that we do on the channel that I think is of great value to us is we actually put everything through standards and practices, through an S&P process for broadcast. And obviously that's a requirement, but what that does is that frees us up to be able to take a lot of this digitally created content that might not otherwise be able to show up on television and get onto television. It's a bit annoying and a bit of a pain to be able to do that, but it actually is an interesting value add in terms of what we're doing. But I think, you know, part of the attraction of India, when you ask me, you know, why India, I'm just, every time I come here, I'm just fascinated by the entrepreneurial energy that exists in this country. Obviously, the educational levels in this country are continuing to rise extremely rapidly. I find that our target audience, of the audience that we go for, we call it Young India. When we talk about Young India, we're not talking about little kids. We're talking about 20 to 30-year-olds. And it's that group of more educated, more sophisticated in terms of their worldview than previous generations here in India have been, that are also going to look for edgier and more dynamic content that they're going to associate their lives with. And that's what we're trying to build.
Also in terms of just numbers, Curt, so we have, you know, you talked about Geo in the last 2.5 years and the way 4G has grown. If you look at some of the reports which talk about projections, probably in the next 3 years or so will be some 800 million smartphone stroke feature phone, but internet users. In that era where everything, a lot of this content will be available on those screens, do you still think there is a future for something that you are building? Because if more and more people start viewing and get access to internet, how will Q fit into that kind of scenario?
Well, you know, another one of sort of the major foundational tenets of our business is the concept of curation. I had a meeting earlier today, and if the world of internet video is the ocean, and you can see everything on the planet, whether it's regular movies on the Netflix and Amazons of the world or whatever it might be through social media, et cetera, we believe that with that incredible amount of video content that's out there, curation becomes even more important than it's ever been. And so part of what we're trying to do, and that's for the consumer, for sure, but it's also very much for brands and advertisers as well. I mean, there's still, you know, horror stories that you read even today about people that have done internet advertising against internet video and ended up against the wrong kind of content that they wanted their brand to be aligned with, and that can't happen 1 out of 1,000,000 times for a brand in terms of that process. And so a lot of what we do with the curation of this very, very highly regarded premium digital content is offer brands the opportunity to advertise against cooking programming or fashion programming or music programming in a way that frankly I think is more familiar with them in terms of what they've done traditionally, but it's aligned with content that's more cutting edge and more desired by the audience that we're targeting.
So on the economics of the business, I'm assuming this is an ad-driven business. It's not, I don't think you're looking at it as a subscription-driven business. One of the challenges of that business will always be, how do you reach your audiences to more and more people watch you, right? So what's your plan for marketing? For example, I'm sure a lot of people in the audience would probably have heard about Q India today. So how do you reach people? What's the plan to reach more and more audiences to tune into your...
I feel like I set up these questions for you because that's one of the other things that we consider key to why we're sort of have something special that we're building. When a traditional television show or movie is made and the studio that makes that film asks the actors that are in that movie to post on Twitter or whatever social media to do that, you know, people today understand authenticity and they realize that that's probably the publicist that sent that tweet out for that particular person or whatever. They were paid to do that. In our case, because these young filmmakers are literally built in as part of their daily lives to the social fabric of the conversations that are taking place on Snapchat and Facebook and WhatsApp and all this social media, we already have organically seen viewership increases because they're just talking about their excitement to be able to see their programming on these platforms. So we literally, without even asking them to do so, you'll see posts that are put out on their Facebook pages or whatever their social media, you know, area of choice might be, Instagram, et cetera, and saying, hey, watch my show on channel 210 on Tata Sky or 125 on Airtel or whatever it might be, because they actually are excited about the fact that their programming is there. So as a business, a lot of what we expect to be doing as we go forward is, again, as we blur that line between traditional and social, is actually leverage, and in some cases actually pay them and use it for promotion for the artists who are creating content for our channel to authentically promote that themselves through their own social media channels, and we think that'll be a real way to drive audience.
So our time's also up, which is not a good word, but our time's up. But last question to you. So in this world, everybody talks about digital. Obviously, we spoke about TV here. Is there a digital strategy which is dovetailed with all that you're doing in Q? So there's an app, there is, what's the digital?
Yeah, obviously we don't consider ourselves really a digital TV company or a digital company. I say we're a multi-screen content provider or a multi-screen content platform. We have Q-branded shows that are on Snapchat India right now that are doing extremely well and getting literally millions of views on a weekly basis. So what we're trying to do is really create a platform that finds and curates and packages the best of the digital content that's being created, and what device they watch it on or what you want to call it doesn't really matter from our point of view.
Great. All the best.
Okay, thanks, Anuj.
Thanks.